Um, Joe Nucleus McGuire wants to know, when did you know you wanted to become a writer, and who inspired you to write?
Well, I got a very, I got a very nice boost toward becoming a writer in fifth grade. Um, when I wrote a good part of the class play that we had to put on in elementary school in those days. A lot of kids had trouble putting things together, and so I simply wrote their parts for them. And I got a lot of encouragement from the teacher for doing that. You know, a lot of, boy, you're really a good guy, and this is really wonderful, and you should really be proud of yourself, and that kind of thing. And I think that when you're at that age, and somebody says that you do something really well, that you then tend to push it. I think that's how kids become good athletes.
Ginny Stark wants to know, what's your experience with police work? Do you have friends in the business, personal experience, or what?
Well, I covered a lot of police work. I covered crime both in Miami and Minneapolis. I'm very familiar with police stations. A good friend of mine started out as a street cop, eventually became a sergeant, and then eventually became the chief of police in St. Paul, Minnesota. I also covered police in Minneapolis, in Fort Lauderdale, in St. Paul. So I've known a lot of cops, but one thing I want to say that comes up occasionally on these forums is that cops don't behave like the way that I show them. Cops are very process oriented. They tend to write a lot of reports. They tend to move fairly slowly on a lot of things. Davenport, of course, leaps from one mountain to another. That's sort of the show business aspect of it, because these are not real cops. They're fictional cops. You have a hard time showing all the process in these kinds of things because it does move slowly. It's not dramatic. So my cops are crosses between real cops and movie cops.
Okay. About the criminals now, Mike Grant asks, the criminals in the Prey series, how do you come up with their MOs? Are they based on real crime? Are they created to serve the larger plot? Or do they just come to mind late at night?
They come out of a lot of different places, the criminals do. You see a lot of crime stories constantly in the newspapers. I covered a lot of them. I don't model any of my criminals on anybody that I actually knew, other than I may pick up some psychological aspects or psychological characteristics of some people, but basically I create them. They're invented. They have to fill a certain role in the book, and so that's what I make them do. My characters, all of them, from top to bottom, are very carefully created. Some of them work better than others, but I'm trying on all of them, and none of them are based specifically on a regular human being, because you really can't do that. It's very hard to do that and make a thriller novel. A thriller novel has to move very quickly, and if you really need to explain a lot about the background and psychology of a person, you don't no longer have a thriller novel. You have some kind of psychological portrait. And so there's a bit of cliche, there's a bit of a movie villain in all of these people, because you have to give the reader somebody that they recognize fairly quickly.
Okay. A business question, sort of, from June Saucy Patry, asking about earnings. She sees many authors post saying they don't make a lot of money. One lady puts out 3 or 4 books a year but claims to not make a lot of money. Why is that possible, and do you have writing, and why would you have writing as your sole source of income?
Well, the thing is that some of us make a lot of money, and I'm one of them. Most writers do not make a lot of money. The thing is that most books will sell around 10,000 copies, and 10 to 15,000 copies at the most. Those are considered fairly successful novels. My books will sell, any place between 300,000 and 400,000. And so once you get to that level, the money becomes quite a bit bigger. But I'm like, usually my novel is right around the 30th best-selling novel. The Lucas novels, the Davenport novels, are like the 30th best-selling novel in the country. Of the other 30 that are ahead of me, a half of those will be written by the same, by a half dozen different people. James Patterson will write 3 or 4 of those, and there are other people who will write 2 or 3 of them. And so, so those top 30 books are probably written by 16 or 17 people. By the time you get down to the 100th best-selling author, those people are probably making about what a newspaper reporter makes, because they're just not selling very many books. It's hard to sell a lot of books, and some of the ability to sell that many books comes because you work harder than other people, and some of them may come from some kind of talent. But as I tell people, a lot of it comes from luck. A lot of it comes from good breaks. I have a very talented friend who's written a number of books. They haven't sold a huge number of books, but one of his problems is I don't think he's ever had the same editor for 2 books in a row. And that means that there's nobody there to push it within the company. There's nobody there to coordinate and to insist on good publicity. And so, in my case, I've had one editor for my entire career, and he's an extremely knowledgeable guy, and he's extremely influential within the company. And so I've been lucky that way. But the money at the top of that market, if you can break into the top 50 or the top 60 writers, you'll get rich. If you write one book every 3 years, even if you get paid $100,000 for it, you're making $30,000 a year, and you are making less than a school teacher. So there are a lot of in and outs to the finances, but for most writers, they're not very encouraging.
Just an aside, from my point of view, the way I've always seen it is that every genre has like one person who's the top tier writer, the A-list writer for that. Like for horror, it's Stephen King. He's got the best-selling ones, and thrillers have...
It's Stephen King and Dean Koontz.
And James Patterson for thrillers.
And James, but there are others in thrillers. I disagree with the one. I think there are maybe a half a dozen.
I don't know if half a dozen, but there's the second tier, which you're part of for the thrillers, which you and Michael Connelly and Sue Grafton and Patricia Cornwell...
I think Michael Connelly is now moving up. I think Michael Connelly is now becoming into like the first tier of writers. But the point is that it's not one, it's 2 or 3 are dominate the sales. I mean, they will always be the #1 bestseller, and they will always stay up there for a while. Yeah. Tom Clancy used to be the one in
the techno thriller kind
but the people who try to come up with numbers like that, one of the reasons you can't is because you can divide the genres almost infinitely. So you can have techno thrillers, right, and then you can have war thrillers, and then you can have police thrillers, and then you can have comedic thrillers, and you can have all these different kinds of thrillers, and then there are 3 people in each of those. So then you say, well, do you look at thrillers, you got 15 people. Yeah, you do. Then there's Michael Crichton. Nobody, for example, has filled Michael Crichton's slot. Yeah. There just isn't anybody else who's writing that, and I think that's an opening possibility for somebody.